If a script could sell itself, you wouldn't be needed. The only way that you can get someone to do anything is by learning about what motivates them. But I never would be able to do something like that if I'm not asking the right questions. What your script lacks, well, after over 2,000 conversations that I've had this year and studied the conversations that went well versus the ones that didn't go so well, I've found that there's 3 major components inside of the script that actually matter. And if you don't have those 3 questions answered by the end of the presentation, you do not have a sale. As soon as we implemented these strategies here, it absolutely skyrocketed our sales. What's up, you guys? My name's Kevin Montes and I work in the financial industry, specifically selling final expense life insurance, mostly over the phone. And over the past 18 months, I've been able to go from $14,000 a year in income to over 120 grand in personal income in 2024. So the reason that I make these videos is just to show you how I did it so that you can do the same. Now, in this video, what I'm going to talk about is one thing that you can do to double your sales using the exact same script that you're already using by just making some minor tweaks to it. So, one of the most common mistakes that I see new agents make coming into the industry is, well, they're a new agent, they don't know what they're doing, their mentor gives them a script to follow and help them out with their process, and they don't follow the script. However, one mistake that I think I see is made even more often than not following the script, and a mistake that I don't really see sales trainers talking about enough, is following the script too closely. So look, when you're a new agent, when you're new to the game and you have no idea what you're doing, yes, you absolutely should follow that script word for word, following it to the T. Why? Because you don't know what you're doing, and that's fine. You need guidance, and that script that was given to you is basically, it's the most efficient version of the conversation that's going to help you lead to a sale, right? So a script is important. I'm absolutely for them. I use one. My team uses the same one. You absolutely should have one. You absolutely should follow it. However, once you get to a certain point, you actually want to take a step back and practice going off of script. And how do you know when you're there? Well, when you actually know the script. Once you've said it enough times, you've practiced it enough times, you've gone through it enough times, right? And you know exactly what questions need to be asked to get through a sale. So once you know the script, once you've internalized it, then that's when you know it's time to move on and start learning how to get off script a little bit. Because here's the thing. Again, a script, especially if it's a good script, which I'm going to go over towards the end of this video, what a good script actually tends to look like. But if it's a good script, again, it's great to follow because that's the most efficient version of the conversation that's going to lead to a result. But what your script lacks, just like every other script out there, no matter how good your mentor is, no matter how good the script is, it does not matter. What every single script in the world lacks is context. Context on the overall conversation that you're having with your client. Context on the life, the personality, the history, the language of the individual that's on the other line, right? On the other side of this conversation. Because see, if you've ever had a presentation before at all, you know that as you're asking the questions on the script, people are opening up about other things that need to be addressed. And like, it's just, they're not scriptable. Right? There's so many variables that can happen in a conversation. I mean, you're dealing with humans after all, right? With people. We're very complex beings. It is what it is. And so there's a lot of unscriptable behaviors and unscriptable scenarios that just are going to happen. And so what's really important isn't you being able to read words off of a piece of paper. A 4th grader can do that. But it's you learning to adapt and morph the script around the conversation that you're having, around the person and the personality that you're dealing with. Because the script provides the framework. You provide the context and also the personality. And it's like a lot of other things. I mean, there's not one correct way to parent, right, to raise children. I think a more simple example, especially because I'm not a parent, so I don't know why I said that. What the hell do I know about parenting? But you know what it's kind of like? It's like seeking information online. So I mean, right now you're watching a video about selling life insurance. Well, how many times have you seen a piece of content online from someone that you trust that tells you, hey, if you want X, Y, and Z, you have to do 1, 2, and 3. And then you scroll a couple times and the next thing you find is someone else that you trust telling you to do the exact opposite. How many times has that happened to you? I'll tell you this, it happens to me all the time. Why? Are they lying? Are they wrong? Do they not know what the hell they're talking about? Chances are it's neither of those things. The real issue is that the advice that they are giving, they're not telling you what you should do. They're telling you what worked for them. But they cannot tell you what's going to necessarily work for you because what they don't have on you is context. They don't have context on your life, on your situation, on your personality, on your skill set, on your past pains, on your specific goals, none of it. So what I've kind of picked up on when I consume this sort of content, instead of trying to take the advice they give at face value, what I'm paying attention to are the frameworks that they're using, the thought process that it takes for them to be able to overcome the challenges that they did. And it's kind of like that whole idea about giving a man a fish versus teaching him how to fish. So it's taking their frameworks to help me make decisions. It's the same thing with a script. A script, no matter how good it is, cannot sell itself. If a script could sell itself, you wouldn't be needed. They'd be hiring fourth graders if it were legal. I don't know, whatever, right? You wouldn't be needed. Especially these days with all the technology we have with AI and ChatGPT and all these like voice generated things and stuff. If a script could sell on its own, don't you think that these insurance companies by now would have implemented all these AI software to just start cold calling our clients and taking them from beginning to end of the sales process so they don't have to pay any of us? They absolutely would have done that by now, but they can't. At least not yet. Will it possibly get there in the future? I don't know. I don't care. But for now, they can't do that. Why? Because it's not the script that sells. It's not even your product that sells. It's not the price that sells. Your clients are not buying into the script. They're buying into you. See, you're going into these conversations thinking that your clients are looking for the best product in the world or that they're coming in looking for the best price. None of that matters. They say that it does, and they say that's what they're looking for, but they're not. What they're looking for is the best agent. So if you're on the front end, if you're in sales, sometimes it doesn't matter how good your offer is, how good your marketing is, how good your pricing is. If the prospect doesn't buy into you as a person, there is no circumstance where they're going to buy because they don't like you. They don't trust you. There's actually a saying, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Right? Especially if you're in final expense, dude, our clients are getting phone calls all the time. Chances are when they pick up the phone and you're on the line, you probably sound just like everybody else, and they can easily tell that you're just trying to make a sale and they're immediately turned off by that. So how can you be different, or how can you show them that you care? Well, that's actually very simple. So it's through building rapport, which I'm sure you've heard that before. But the way that I personally build rapport is simply by asking them about themselves and the things that they're interested in. Now, when I say asking about themselves, I'm not talking about asking about what they want for a funeral or what they want the life insurance for. And all of that's important, all of the stuff in the script, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about asking about them. I want to know, are they married? Do they have kids? Do they have grandkids? If they have grandkids, how often do they see them? What do they do when they get to spend time together? Is my prospect still working or is he retired? If he's working, what does he do? If he's retired, what did he do? What does he do now with all this free time, right? These are all questions that I like to ask just to get to know my prospect on a deeper level, because that's actually doing three things for me. One, I'm genuinely just having more fun in the conversation because I'm actually getting to know somebody rather than just being fully transactional and going through the motions. So it's just more fun. Two, the only way that you can get someone to do anything is by learning about what motivates them. And the only way to learn what motivates them is to learn about what they care about. So ask about what they care about, right? And these are questions that are going to lead to that. Chances are, if they're married, well, they care a lot about their wife. If they have kids, they care a lot about their kids. And so you're quickly finding out what it is that drives your prospect. And this is going to help you gain a better understanding of what actually drives your prospect. And the third thing that it's doing is by the time I get to the next question on my script, for example, one question that you absolutely should have in your script, if you don't have it, then make sure you add it, is, well, what made you want to start looking at this in the first place? So instead of me having to ask that question up front, most of the time, since I've been able to build so much rapport with this person in just 5 minutes, right? A lot of times they'll give me their whole life story in 5 minutes just from asking the right questions. And so by the time I get to this question here, that's going to bring me back into the script, instead of having to ask, what made you start looking into this? I more than likely already know by now. So instead I can ask a different way. Something that, just as an example, sounds maybe a little bit like this. Well, Mr. Johnson, I know that you said your mom had just passed away a few years ago, and it sounds to me like it's actually taking you a couple of years to get back on your feet after being set back by having to pay for all that yourself. So, I mean, is that what really made you want to start looking into life insurance for yourself? Because you just don't want to leave your two daughters in that same kind of situation? Because see, what that's doing is doing a lot. One, I'm labeling them with the problem, which is showing that I'm listening, right? Deeply listening and fully fully understanding their concern. And two, it's allowing me to have a lot more control of the conversation, rather than me having to just ask, well, what is it that made you look into it? And a lot of times they'll just give you a surface level answer. Well, I already know the real reason, so I'm able to guide us back into the script with a very emotionally charged question that's labeling them with the problem and showing them that I'm listening. But I never would be able to do something like that if I'm not asking the right questions. So what are some good questions to ask in order to help build rapport and kind of get your client to open up a little bit more about their situation? So some of my favorite questions to ask, very basic. One, are they married? If they are married, how long have they been married? How did they actually meet their spouse? They love talking about that. And then lastly, I'll follow that one up with, how did you know that he or she was the one? Now, why am I asking a question like that? Well, because if they are married, chances are that's probably going to be the beneficiary. That's probably the person that they're doing this for. And a question like that is going to bring in a lot of emotion. And so as we move along the process, they're thinking about how much they love their spouse. The next set of questions I like to ask, do you have any kids? How many kids do you have? Do you have any grandkids? How often do you get to see or spend time with each of them? I might even ask them, hey, and by the way, who's your favorite? Again, I'm asking all these questions because, well, maybe someone along these lines are the beneficiary. It could be the kids, it could be the grandkids. And I kind of want to know what their relationship is like. And it's also good for them because they love talking about their kids, right? They love talking about their family. One more set of questions that I'll share is, are you still working or are you retired? What do you do or what did you do when you were working? How long have you been working there and how do you like it? Or if they're retired, I might ask, how are you liking retirement? The reason I like to ask about their work is, well, because think about it, most of us tend to spend a lot of time at work in one way, shape, or form. So it's kind of a part of our identity, really, if you think about it. And so that is going to give me a better understanding of kind of what they've done, what they've been through, who they really are. And if they're retired, asking that last question at the end is also going to give me a good idea of what they're doing now with their free time and who they're spending the most time with, which again, that is another clue for who the beneficiary might be. So those are some questions that I like to ask that help me build rapport with my clients. And so a couple things to pay attention to is when I do ask a question, one thing that I recommend is when you ask a question, go for deep. Never settle for the first question. Why? Because your first question is typically going to be a surface level question. Are you married? Yes or no? That doesn't really do that much for you. Do you have kids? Yes or no? Are you working? Yes or no? Very surface level. I mean, they give you information, but not really anything you can do with it. Then you ask the next question. Oh, how long have you been married? Or, oh, how many kids do you have? Oh, what is it that you do? Right, so now you're getting them to open up a little bit. Okay, then the third one becomes, oh, how did you meet? That opens them up to just tell a whole story about their spouse, right? Do you have any grandkids? That's going to open up to, not only are you getting a ton of information on their family lineage, I think is what it's called, but if they have grandkids, they're very likely to, just want to talk a lot about them. Even the question, how long have you worked there? I mean, that can get them going for a while too. Once you get to the fourth question, that's where the deep connection is made. So that's just one thing that I've been doing for a long time. I don't remember where I heard it. I don't think I made it up myself. I'm pretty sure I heard it somewhere. But when you ask a question, go for deep. Although I don't remember where I heard that specifically from, I do know that the overall concept of getting people to open up and talk about them, that idea I got from one of my favorite books of all time, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. If you have not read that book, highly recommend. Go read it right now. Amazing freaking book. And another book that I recommend for anyone that's wanting to learn how to communicate, especially in doing sales, is called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Two things that I still do that I took from that book: mirroring and labeling. So mirroring my prospect and labeling them with the problem. What is mirroring? Well, it's one way that I also get my clients to open up, when they're keeping their guard up. And it's very simple. Here's what it looks like. I ask my prospect, well, what made you want to start looking into this in the first place? Mr. Johnson says, well, I'm getting older. Mirroring in this case would be me saying, getting older? That's it. So instead of asking someone, oh, okay, tell me more. Oh, what do you mean? By just repeating what they said back, 9 times out of 10, it'll get them to elaborate a little bit more without them feeling like you're being too intrusive. And it's also just mirroring their overall, for lack of a better word, vibe. So if they're being loud, I'm gonna, raise my voice a little bit. If they're kind of whispering, if it's like Miss Betty on the phone and she's very quiet and fragile, then I'm gonna lower my voice too and kind of just, this is kind of what I sound like when I'm dealing with someone like that. Or I could, raise my voice. If someone's being kind of, assertive, then I'm gonna be assertive as well. Now, it doesn't mean get argumentative, right? That's a whole different thing. But I'm just saying, in my vocabulary, in the way that I speak, in my tonality, right? I'm gonna reflect exactly how they're speaking to me. Why do I do that? Because people like people like them. You're going to tend to gravitate towards people that act like you, that talk like you, that look like you. So that's another thing that I do. And then lastly, the labeling part, labeling them with the problem. So it's kind of like what I did earlier when I said, oh, well, it sounds like, hey, well, Mr. Johnson, is that what made you want to start looking at life insurance? Because, you had a heart attack, 2 months ago, and it made you realize none of us are invincible, and you don't want to leave your kids with a financial burden that they cannot handle. It sounds like that's what you're wanting to do. Am I understanding that right? That's called labeling. And the reason that that's so effective in building rapport, again, is because it's showing your client or your prospect that you're listening and that you're understanding them. So, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Never Split the Difference, 2 amazing books. Highly recommend them. Okay, and to wrap this up, as for the script itself, what actually matters, right? What's actually worth following, quote unquote, to the T? Well, after over 2,000 conversations that I've had this year and studied the conversations that went well versus the ones that didn't go so well, I've found that there's 3 major components inside of the script that actually matter. Okay, so the 3-part framework of a winning script. Who, what, why? Those 3 questions are the only thing that matters. And if you don't have those 3 questions answered by the end of the presentation, you do not have a sale. So who? Who are they looking into this for? I mean, obviously they're wanting to insure themselves, but the benefit isn't for themselves, it's to leave it behind to somebody else. Who is that person? Who is that person they're wanting to leave something behind to? Who is that person that they're wanting to protect? Who's their beneficiary? It's unbelievable how many times I've heard people go all the way to the quote or to the end of the script or all the way to the application without even knowing the beneficiary's name. And then they're surprised when the client doesn't want to give them their bank account information. Dude, there's not enough emotion in this conversation because you haven't named the stakes, right? That's one of my favorite things that I've heard Roger Short and Chris Paul, 2 amazing trainers in this industry. The stakes have a name. So it's very important to quickly find the name of their beneficiary, because if you can name them specifically throughout the conversation, then your prospect is able to have a clearer visual of what it would actually look like for their beneficiary if they don't get some kind of coverage in place. So that's the who. Who is this for? The next one is what. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is the reason for them wanting to look at life insurance in the first place? So there's really only a handful of reasons that someone might be looking at life insurance. Are they wanting to cover a funeral expense, right? Is it going to be a burial or a cremation? Are they wanting to pay off a house? Are they worried that if they pass away with no coverage, their wife and kids are going to have to sell off the house or move somewhere else and start a brand new life because they can't keep up with the mortgage? Is that what concerns them? Is it for income replacement? Are they wanting to make sure that their family is able to continue to live off of his income with or without him being present? Or is it as simple as wanting to leave behind a legacy? Maybe they want to leave behind a gift for one of their kids, for one of their grandkids. It's usually one of the grandkids when that's the case. But is that what they're wanting to do, right? So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Because chances are they're not wanting to look into life insurance for fun or just because they feel like everybody should have it. If you ask your client why they're looking into it and that's their answer, well, everybody needs it, that is not good enough to move on, right? You've got to go deeper. So what's the actual problem that we're trying to solve? What exactly is it that their beneficiary is going to use this money for? And lastly, why? Why is it so important for them? Why is their beneficiary's peace of mind such a big deal to them that they're willing to put a percentage of their income into a plan that the person paying is never truly going to benefit from? That's what it is. My life insurance policy, I'm never going to see that money. It's Alyssa that's going to get all of it. I got it because I love her and want to take care of her. It's not for me at all, right? So why is that so important for them to do? And also, why are they deciding to want to look into life insurance now? What maybe happened recently that made them realize the actual importance of it? These are all very important questions to ask. And if you move on and give them a quote without having these questions answered, you're not going to get the sale. And even if you do get the sale, it's probably going to charge back. One quick little pro tip that I will give you when it comes to asking for the why, because I can definitely understand, especially for a new agent, it could be pretty nerve-wracking having to ask such an uncomfortable question, right? Especially when you're not used to it. So one way that I ask that question, I still do this, by the way, is when I ask these questions, I actually like to play devil's advocate. Right? So I ask these questions in a way that makes me sound like I don't even think they should be getting life insurance. And I want them to convince me that we should move forward with this conversation. So for example, example, the way that I ask why it's so important to you, I might say something like, Mr. Johnson, so it sounds to me like your daughter Angela, she has a career. I would assume she could take care of herself. Why do you feel like it's so important for you to leave that money behind to her? And now Mr. Johnson is having to defend his position and convince me of why he absolutely believes that he needs to leave some money behind for Angela. And if someone ever does actually say something like, oh, well, I don't know, I think you're right, I don't think I do need it, that person was never sold in the first place. Even if I got all the way to the quote or even to the app, it wasn't going to go through. So at least now I can know that, and I have a chance to overcome whatever concerns or to communicate the actual value of the product before we move on to the quote, right? So that's just something that I like to do. If you feel uncomfortable doing it, don't do it, because what really matters more than anything is asking these questions and having these conversations with confidence. But again, so those three things, the who, the what, and the why. If you do not have an answer to all three of those conversations before you get to the quote, I'm telling you right now, you do not have a sale. So these are all things that you can implement inside of your own script, just little questions that you can ask around what you're already doing. And if you feel like you've been missing any of those questions inside of your script, especially part of that 3-part framework, well, then now you can add those into what you're doing. And what I can say is what it's done for me and for my team is as soon as we implemented these strategies here, it absolutely skyrocketed our sales.